Okay, since the school let out, we've been dealing with adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numerals. I don't have everyone's quiz in yet from yesterday, so I can't give that back and talk to you about it, but from what I do have, it looks like you pretty much know what you're doing. All right, we'll look back on adding and subtracting, don't forget that, but we want to move on to multiplying fractions. And I have great news for you. To multiply fractions, I think personally, is a lot easier than adding and subtracting. Because to multiply fractions, we don't need to find a common denominator, and we don't need to get equivalent fractions, find the missing numerator. So that's two steps that we can cut out of. And you say, well then, if you don't find a common denominator, how do you multiply fractions? Well, here's the rule. All you have to do to multiply fractions is multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. And you say, well, Mr. Dude, don't I keep the denominator the same? No. And you say, well, you keep the denominator the same when you add and subtract. And I say, because adding and subtracting is different than multiplying. You don't add whole numbers and multiply them the same way. You don't add decimals and multiply them the same way. So we're not going to add fractions and multiply fractions the same way. So again, all you do to multiply fractions is multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So if I had something like 2/3 times 4/5, again, I don't need a common denominator. I don't need to find missing numerators. All I need to do is multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 5 is 15. And that's my answer, 8/15. Now again, you say, well, don't I need to make sure it's proper and simplified? Very good point. All fractions must be proper and simplified, so I do have to add that to my rule here, okay? And that is, make sure your answer and again, all fractions must be proper and all fractions must be simplified. By the way, word of warning, you have a homework assignment on IXL. They might not make you simplify. I don't understand how on earth they could do that, but that's what happened with the adding you all said. So again, check and see. If you're simplifying and they mark it wrong, then don't simplify. But I really think you should always simplify. By the way, when you're multiplying fractions, if I had something like this, 3/4 times 8/9, okay, again, I could multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. 3 times 8 is 24, and 4 times 9 is 36. But that's not my right answer, because 24 over 36 can be simplified. What goes into 24 and 36, that's what you have to find out. By the way, I told you when you go to simplify, don't start by checking 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Start by checking your times table. And it turns out that 24 and 36 are in a couple of times tables. They're in the 4 times table, because 4 times 24 is, 4 times 6 is 24, and 4 times 9 is 36. They're also both in the 6 times table, because 6 times 4 is 24, and 6 times 6 is 36. But they're also in the 12 times table, because 12 times 2 is 24, and 12 times 3 is 36. By the way, you can choose anything that goes into both, but the bigger the better, the biggest the best, so 12 would be the best. but I got a feeling a lot of you wouldn't know your 12 times table well enough to do that. So you could use 6 goes 4 times and 6 goes 6 times, but then what goes into 4 and 6? 2 goes 2 times and 2 goes 3 times. And again, when you simplify, you don't stop because you find something that goes. You keep checking until you make sure nothing goes. By the way, I know a shortcut way of doing this. You might know it too. I don't know if you had this last year in 4th grade with Miss Welty and Miss Dwyer, but if you did, they might have talked about something called cross-canceling. And cross-canceling is really a way to simplify before you multiply. Again, what can I simplify before I multiply? 3/4 can't be simplified, and 8/9 can't be simplified. But you can simplify any top with any bottom. And again, that means I could simplify 3 and 9. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 9 3 times. And I could simplify 4 and 8, because 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 8 2 times. And again, now 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 3 is 3. By the way, one time I had a little girl raise her hand in class and say, Mr. Do I have to simplify before I multiply? And the answer is no. You can make things harder on yourself. You can multiply bigger numbers times each other, and you can simplify bigger answers. But why on earth wouldn't you want to simplify before you multiply? Because it's a way to make the problem easier. By the way, the reason I think this is called cross-canceling is because the 3 cancels out and becomes a 1, the 4 cancels out and becomes a 1, and they were crossways that you simplify. But the truth is, you don't have to simplify crossways, and it doesn't have to cancel out completely. Okay, so it doesn't have to cancel, and it doesn't have to simplify crossways. All that has to happen is you have to simplify any top with any bottom. So if I had something like this one right here, I'm trying to think of a good one. If I had this one right here and I wanted to cross cancel, okay, 6 doesn't go into 15 and 6 doesn't go into 21. 8 doesn't go into 15 and 8 doesn't go into 21. So you might say you can't simplify before you multiply because it doesn't cancel out. But you actually can simplify before you multiply because something does go into both 6 and 21. What goes into both 6 and 21? 3. 3 goes into 6 2 times. 3 goes into 21 7 times. By the way, I can't simplify anything else before I multiply now, so I can multiply 2 times 8 is 16, and 15 times 7, 35 carry you 3, 7 and 3 is 10, 105. And again, I still simplified sideways, but I didn't cancel anything out. I made them smaller, simpler, but not canceled out. By the way, I meant to put a 6 here and make this 16. Let's not make it 16. Let's put a 20 here and make it a 20. All right. So now, if I had something like this, 6/20ths times 8/21st, and I wanted to simplify again, the 6 and the 21, you still can go 3 goes into 6 2 times, and 3 goes into 21 7 times. They didn't cancel, but they did simplify. And you could simplify 8 and 20, because 4 goes into 8 2 times, and 4 goes into 25 times. And they didn't cancel either. I'm sorry, 2 goes into 20 10 times. I'm crazy. Okay? Wait, no, 4 goes into 25 times. I was right. Okay, so now I can multiply 2 times 2 is 4, 5 times 7 is 35, and that would be your right answer. So again, I highly recommend that when you multiply fractions that you use the shortcut and simplify before you multiply. I sure hope IXL makes you simplify, because that's the way you can use the shortcut. All right, by the way, I don't know, but you might have something like this: 3/4 times 7/8 times 4/9. And now you got 3 fractions. You say, well, how would you do that? Well, if for 2 fractions you multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, for 3 fractions you multiply numerator times numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator times denominator. But wait, before you do that, use your shortcut and simplify before you multiply. By the way, that's any top with any bottom. So you could cancel out the 4s. 4 goes into 4 once here, and 4 goes into 4 once here. The first denominator with the last numerator, any top with any bottom. And 3 goes into 3 once here, 3 goes into 9 3 times here. And now you've made it a lot easier to do. 1 times 7 is 7, 7 times 1 is 7, and then 1 times 8 is 8, 8 times 3 is 24. By the way, even though you simplify before you multiply, you should always make sure you can't simplify when you finish, because you might think you simplified everything when you didn't. So again, that's how you multiply fractions, and that's what your homework on IXL is on tonight. So again, I sure hope they make you simplify, but if you simplify and get it wrong, you might want to go and check and see if they want you to do it without simplifying it. I sure hope that's not the case. But when I give you a quiz or when I give you a test, it must be proper and it must be simplified. But it's pretty easy. Just numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. But if you're smart, you'll use the shortcut and simplify before you multiply.